Hi, everybody. I have a story for you today, and this story is a biography, so it's a story of a real person's life. The book that we're doing for our read aloud right now is Henry and the Clubhouse, which is written by Beverly Cleary. And so today I want to tell you about Beverly Cleary because she was born in the town that our school is in, which is pretty cool. So, Beverly Cleary, the author of all the Ramona books and Henry Huggins books and Ralph S. Mouse books and all of those, among others, was born on April 12th, 1916, in McMinnville, which I think is really cool that this author, whose books are all over the place and something that almost every kid has read some of, was born in our town. Now, she was born there, but she grew up in a little town called Yamhill, which some of you might know about. And her mother was a teacher and her father was a farmer. And she ran around out on the farm for the whole first 5 years of her life, just having fun doing farm stuff. She didn't go to school when she was little. She didn't have preschool or anything like that. And she had a lovely time for those first couple years of her life. And when she was 6, her family moved to Portland, and her dad got a different job, and everything changed in her life. She suddenly went to school. She started first grade, and she'd had no school ever before that. And she lived in a town in the city instead of living, way out in the country. And she didn't have a farm anymore, and she didn't have as much places to run around. But she got used to it. She adapted. She started running around her neighborhood and, playing with all the kids there instead of running around out in the fields. And she got used to going to school. In the beginning, school was really hard for Beverly Cleary because she'd never done it before and it was new. And she had a really hard time starting learning how to read. When she was in first grade, she felt like it was the impossible thing and she just couldn't manage to do it. But the librarian at her school was really nice and helped her find some books that were interesting. And within a couple years, Beverly Cleary turned into someone who was a confident reader, and she felt like she could definitely read and she loved to read. And one of her favorite things to do was to just go sit in the library and read for hours and hours, which reminds me of some of you and myself, actually, as a kid, too. So she kept growing up. She lived in Portland and she watched, Portland starting to change because she was born in the early 1900s. And there was a lot changing in the world right then. As she grew up, she started writing a little more. In the beginning, she only enjoyed reading. She didn't like to write stories when she was little, like some of you do. She got into writing when she was in middle school and a little bit beyond that. And something I read that is really interesting about her is that she won a bunch of kids' writing contests when she was in middle school. And she says that you should always enter contests because sometimes only a few people will enter and it's really easy to win. Now, it might be a little bit different now with more people in the world, but Beverly Cleary always thought that some of those contests she won when she was little, she probably won because nobody else entered. But I'm not sure about that because I bet she was a pretty decent writer as a kid too. When she finished high school, she went to college to get a degree in writing and art and literature and all of that good stuff. And while she was going to college and getting her degree, she did a bunch of little random jobs. Like she was a seamstress for a while, so someone who sews clothing and fixes people's hems. And she was a chambermaid for a while, which means she would go to the houses of wealthy people who could afford to pay her and do their chores for them. And she did those things while she was in college. But once she finished college, she went and became a librarian because she remembered the librarian who had helped her when she was little and she loved to read and thought, that would be the perfect work for me. She always thought that someday she might write a book, but she hadn't gotten around to it yet. So she was a librarian for a while. And when she was a librarian, something she noticed was that the children who came in were often looking for books about kids like them. They wanted just stories about normal kids doing normal stuff. Now, if you've ever read one of Beverly Cleary's books about Ramona or Henry Huggins, those are definitely books about normal kids doing normal stuff. It's what we call realistic fiction. Now, Ralph S. Mouse, totally not realistic fiction because there's a mouse on a motorcycle, and that's not realistic. But her Henry and Ramona books, those ones were written with the idea of normal kids wanting books about just life. And she wrote about specifically some of the things she remembered from her childhood and some of the things that she heard about from the children that she helped as a librarian, and some of the things that she saw just happening around town, and then some things straight from her imagination. She was a librarian and didn't start being a writer until she was in her early 30s. So when she was about as old as I am now, that's when she decided to finish a book and get it started. Now, when we talk about Beverly Cleary, the first books that I think of are the Ramona books, because it seems like they're one of the most popular ones. But those were actually not her first books. Her very first book that she wrote in 1950 was Henry Huggins. So the one we're reading right now, Henry in the Clubhouse, is the, I believe, 5th book in that series. But don't worry, they're not ones you really need to read in order. That was her very first book. And when she wrote it, it got published right away. Sometimes authors write a book and they have to take it and bring it to lots of different publishers and say, do you like this book? Do you like this book? Do you like this book? Until someone says, yes, I like this book. I will make lots of copies and help you sell it. But with Henry Huggins, people knew it was going to be good right away. And so she didn't have a hard time getting that book started. And in fact, as soon as that book was published, people started asking her to write more books. One of the things that someone asked that she said no to right away was to write a book about someone in kindergarten. And she said no because she said, I never even went to kindergarten. I was still at home just playing and being free on the farm at that point. I don't even know anything about what kindergarten was like. But about 5 years after she wrote Henry Huggins, she had 2 babies of her own. She had twin girls. And when that happened, something changed in her brain. Maybe just enough time had passed, or maybe she had little kids and thought, maybe I will know about this. But that is when she wrote the first Ramona book. So Henry Huggins actually came first, which I think is pretty cool. Now, lost track of my brain here. Oh, so she kept writing books. She wrote tons of books. She wrote and she wrote and she wrote. And once she started writing, she stopped being a librarian. She officially just was a writer, which isn't something that everyone is lucky enough to be able to do. A lot of people who are writers have to have other jobs too, because they can't get books finished fast enough and make enough money from them to be able to have that be their only job. But Beverly Cleary was lucky that everyone was really into the type of book that she was writing, and she was a lovely writer, still is. So she could be just a writer, and she didn't have to do anything else. She wrote for so long, for decades, lots of tens of years. And she's actually still alive right now, which is cool and amazing and awesome. She was born in 1916, which means that she is 104 years old right now. And she has stopped writing now. She just hangs out and reads books herself and says that she's done writing, but really enjoys getting to read now. I think it's neat that she is still around. And I think it's really neat that up in Portland, there are a whole bunch of things named after her and built for her because she was living in this one specific corner of Portland when she grew up. And that's like the area that she wrote about. So if you go to Portland someday when quarantine is over, you might try to find the statue of Ramona that is in one of the parks in Portland. Or you might want to drive past the elementary school that used to be called Fernwood and is now called Beverly Cleary Elementary School. She won a bunch of awards for her writing and just kept going. She loved to write, and she knew that the books that she was writing were things that children wanted. They were books that children would love. And she felt like it was important to make sure that children had books that were right for them. And so she tried to write books that were just right for children. Down in the comments section, I'm going to leave you a couple links to go follow if you want to find out more about her. One will be a recording of an interview that she did when she was in her 90s. So somewhere between like 15 and 20 years ago, where people sent in questions to ask her. So you can hear her voice talking and hear her answering some questions. Have fun going and investigating about her. And if you want to follow up by learning a lot, maybe go Google out the picture of the Ramona statue or read a Ramona book or a different Beverly Cleary book on your own. You could. If you wanted to do a book report on one of her books, you absolutely could do that. And if all you feel like doing is getting out your journal and recording some of the information I talked about, you can do that too. Have a good day. Enjoy Read Aloud next time some more comes out, and I miss you all.